Torah on Tap is co-sponsored Lili Nishmat Yisrael Tzvi ben Yaakov Halevi Alav Shalom by his granddaughter, Lili Nishmat Edmundo Safti Edmund ben Fortuna Alav Shalom by Helene Safti. May the Neshamot all have an Aliyah. Okay. We are in the middle of doing Kibbutz Avim, and if you missed out in the last couple of weeks. You can find those classes on our YouTube. There was a great intro, and then like some questions and answers we dealt with last class that we met. What's that? Do you have sheets? There are more sheets. There are sheets around. I don't have them up here, but there are some sheets over there, and over there, and over there. Yeah. Okay, so what we're doing today is I decided that the best way to go through this is to open up the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Jewish Code of Law. And it was written about 500 years ago by Rav Yosef Karo, and he just lays it out very, very clearly. There's 25 points that he talks about Kibbutz Avim. It's all based on the Talmud, on the Gemara, different places in the Talmud that discuss these laws of Kibbutz Avim, and he makes it like super dry, very boring. But just so you have the facts, just so it's super clear, I feel like we'll have that as a foundation and basis, and then we'll use that as a jumping off point to kind of like ask questions and answer some of those questions. But before we begin, I just want to tell a story. Okay, I don't like telling stories. If you know me, but I'm going to tell a story because I think it's relevant. I saw this is actually very cool because one of the you'll see at the end of it. I'll explain it to why. There's someone by the name of Chaim of Worms, who was a well-known rabbi. He was blessed with 3 very intelligent and talented sons. Betzalel, Yaakov, and my favorite, Helman. Before the mayonnaise, this name, okay, is about 600 years old, okay? Helman was his name. Anyway, I don't know. That's what it says. Okay, all of them were outstanding. They were all brilliant, and there was a tremendous amount of pride and envy. You know, everyone said how fortunate these children are. They were righteous and walking in their father's footsteps. Everyone loved them. They were all brilliant. Now, there was the children loved being in the area that they were in, but they wanted to travel to Poland and study under the famed Torah master, the Maharal, or Shlomo Luria. This is like, he lived between 1510 and 1573. So, the father of Chaim of Worms, by the way, everyone know where Worms was? What? Worms was like on the border of Germany and France, okay, but actually in France. And he was a rabbi there. The famous man of everyone here should be familiar with, the famous rabbi, Rashi was in Worms, okay, and this is where Ashkenazi Jewry came from. So this is like a very prestigious position to be a rabbi there. And the children said, "Can we go learn by the Maharal? We want to learn by the Maharal. We want to learn Torah from him." So the father said, "You know what? Let me think about it." He tells the boys, okay, remember, Betzalel, Yaakov, and Helman. He says, Yaakov and Helman, you can go, but Betzalel, I'm asking you to stay home. I'm asking you not to go with the other brothers. So out of Kibbutz Av, out of respect for his father, he decides not to go. He stays home with his dad. So a few years pass, and these 2 boys come back from Poland, and they become like super scholars. Not just scholars, they were scholarly before, but now they're super scholars under the tutelage of the Maharal. He enhanced their brain, and they're like super, super amazing. So Betzalel, the oldest brother, says, what a shame that I wasn't able to, I wasn't allowed to go, because my father, asked me to stay. Who knows what would have become with me? He was just as bright as his other brothers, not brighter. And he stayed behind, and he lost out on these experiences. So the father, Chaim, noticed this despondent look on Betzalel's face, and he felt bad. So, he said, he's thinking, like, what can I do to, appease him for this lost opportunity? What can I say to my son to make him feel better about not going? So he turns to his son and he says, you know what? I'm going to give you a bracha. I'm going to give you my personal blessing that as a reward for you not going, your children, okay, will be bigger scholars than you were or than I was. Okay? So he has 4 sons, Betzalel, and each of them are famous. You won't know the first 3, but the last one I'm sure you'll all be familiar with. Okay, his oldest son was the chief rabbi, okay, of a place called Friedenberg, Rav Chaim. Okay, he wrote a sefer called the Sefer HaChaim, which you should all be familiar with. Then he had another a son named Rav Sinai, who was Rosh Yeshiva of Marin. He had a third son, Rav Shimshon, the chief rabbi of Kermanitz. and he was also a renowned scholar. But the fourth was the most famous of his legend. It was none other than the legendary Maharal of Prague. Right? So he had 4 children. The Maharal of Prague is one of the most, he's one of my favorite authors. He lived about 500 years ago. And so here's a boy who sacrificed for his father, should have been, could have been this great who knows what, an author of his own. And the Maharal, by the way, just so you understand, if you like Chassidut, all Chassidut is built off of the Maharal's work. Right? The Baal Shem Tov used the Maharal, and all Chassidim themselves use the Maharal's Sfarim as the foundation cornerstone for all the ideas of Chassidut. So Chabad, Belz, Satmar, all of those other Chassidish groups, their foundational teachings are based on Maharal's teachings. So here's a guy who decides not to go and do what should have been the right thing to do, and he gets blessed by his father, and he has these 4 remarkable children, and is well known for his son, the Maharal, and his scholarship. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that you sacrifice your lives for your parents in the hope of them giving you some famed blessing that your children will be these famed scholars. I'm just mentioning that we as Jews believe that everything that we do, even the small sacrifice that we do, there's always a net gain somewhere. There's never a scenario where you give up on something where you are not rewarded for the thing that you gave up on. Okay? Having said that, let's talk a little bit about kibbud av v'em, the laws of honoring your parents. Okay, I'm going to put on my glasses. It's weird for me because I'm reading glasses, and I just became a grandfather 8 weeks ago, and all of a sudden my vision starts going. So I hate wearing these things, but they help me read. I can't see without them. So mechila. Here I go. It's public. I'm public now. All right. Okay, so it says as follows. So this is, again, straight out Sefaria, Shulchan Aruch, Yoredea, Code of Jewish Law, and it goes like this. What is honor and what is fear? And there are laws, and there are 25 paragraphs in it. There are 25 halachot that are brought down in this, okay? You could stop me at any point and ask me any questions you would like. He says, one must be very careful concerning his father and mother's honor and fear, okay? But nevertheless, the court does not enforce the honor on the father or the mother, since it is a positive commandment, a reward of which, alongside it, such as the court does not enforce. So, because this is a mitzvah aseh, positive mitzvah, the Beit Din cannot come along and enforce, kibbud av v'em. Now, this is actually a fascinating question. We know typically when, for example, we just celebrated Shavuot, and we know that there's a mitzvah of making birkat Torah before you're going to learn Torah. Right, in the morning, part of the brachot, part of the morning blessings, and you make the blessing in the morning, right? So you make that blessing once, and you make it only once. And the question is, why don't you make that blessing every single time before you sit and learn Torah? Why is it once a day? And similarly, why is it that when it comes to kibbud av v'em, there's no bracha? If it's such a big importance, it's a commandment, we're commanded to do something, it's a mitzvah to say this is one of the 10 commandments. We're talking about like the 10 big ones, right? Honoring your parents is a big deal, and therefore we should understand what that is. Well, why isn't there a blessing? Why isn't there like a l'shem yichud for honoring your parents? Why isn't there some kind of like meditative blessing that you recite before you speak to your parents? Now the truth is, I hope my mom's not going to watch this, but I often do have like a small little prayer I say before I speak to my mom, and it's that I hope this conversation is meaningful. I hope I don't say anything that gets me in trouble, and I hope it lasts for the appropriate amount of time so I could do the things I need to accomplish for myself today. That's my own little, you don't have to do that, that's my own little thing. I just feel like I need to be mentally prepared, not because I need mental preparation, there's nothing wrong with me speaking, of course, to my mother, but I just feel like it's hard to make that time, especially when we're so busy doing all the things that we do. I have 6 children, I'm a grandpa, I have other responsibilities, but my mother is also a responsibility of mine, and it's not easy because it's so difficult, and it's so difficult because it's the right thing to do. The difficult thing and the right thing are generally the same. So there is a mitzvah of honoring your parents. It's a mitzvah I say it's always there. So we understand what that means, right? A little bit. We'll hear a little bit more, but he says, what is fear? So number 2, he says, fear is he should not stand in the place designated for him to stand in the consultation of the elders with his colleagues, or the place designated for him to pray, nor she's in the place designated for him to recline at his home, nor contradict his words, nor determine his words in the presence, even to say father's words appear correct, like you're going to correct him and say, oh yeah, that sounds right. And he should not call him by his name, neither in life nor in death, but rather say, Father, my teacher. If his father's name was like the name of the others, he changes their names. If it's an unusual name, then not at all the people call their offspring with, but it's permissible to call them with the other name that is common. So, okay, not in front of him. Now, what does that mean? So, fear, the way in which we show yir'ah, fear of the father, goes like this. Number one is very simple. Don't sit in his chair. Your father has a recliner at home that he loves, or has a chair at the dining table. You cannot sit in that chair. And not only that, if he has a spot in the Beit Knesset, in the synagogue, that he likes to stand in, or a mother that goes to Beit Knesset that has a special seat, that's their area, you can't stand or occupy that space. That's their space. And you're showing reverence for them by doing that. Okay, this is the hardest one. Okay, not to correct your parent. Your parent says something that you radically disagree with. Okay, now, this is a massive debate as to how far you could actually take this. Does that mean that they say something that's like fake news? They say, Ma, like you're saying fake news? Where do I go? How do I do it? How do I say it? Okay, this is actually a machloket. Can you do it in front of them? Can you do it behind their back? When your sibling is there and they walk out, can you do it there? How do you do this? So I think the answer to this question is it depends on the nature of your relation with your parents. If your parents feel that there's enough respect and awe in that relationship, and you could say it, you could disagree with them in a respectful way, then by all means do it. But if the relationship is somewhat tarnished, and there's already issues there, and you're already struggling with kibbud av and em, right? Then there's no point in going ahead and correcting them. It's just going to make things worse. So it depends on, that's why you'll find often debate as to how we apply these laws. And the truth is, it would depend on the circumstances of your relationship, the nature of the relationship you have with your parents. So you determine how to apply these halachot. Yeah. What do you mean? So your parents said something, you know what? You know the problem is? You're just lazy. And if you wouldn't be so lazy, then, you wouldn't have this problem, right? And you could say, well, no, that's not true. I am not lazy, this and that. So there's two things that are important to learn about criticism. This is super true about relationships, by the way. All relationships, especially when you're in a relationship with a person, right? Never, ever use a criticism about yourself as a way to respond. It's like a weird thing. You naturally think that the way in which you deal with a situation where someone says or thinks something about you in a negative way, to say, well, that's not true, let me explain why. Never do that. Ask them to explain it to you. Go into it. Lean into it. It's super powerfully profound. I'll tell you why. Because the most important part of a person's criticism has to do with how they perceive you and understanding why they perceive you that way. If you stop and correct them, you'll never figure out why they think that way of you. Right? So I think it's just better, and by the way, it's a super disarming tool to do, because often I find that people don't really have a real clear way of explaining why they think that way of you. It's a gut feeling, I assume this, but there's no real oomph to it. So two things will happen. One is, once you realize that what they're saying is BS, bullschnitzel, right? Then you won't be as offended because it's coming out of their. So if you have if there's something substantial there, there's some real criticism, then you want to hear it and you want to know what it is. So that's the way you could deal with it. You could fix it. So don't rush to correct criticism. It's the hardest. It's so counterintuitive. When you hear criticism, that's an opportunity to learn about what people are thinking about you. You'll never know what they're thinking. Say, oh, really? You think that's true? That's so interesting. Well, tell me, why do you think that? What makes you say that? Why do you lean into it? And then once you have the information, now either if it's true, you could respond to it, you could correct it. And if it's not true, then you can say, well, okay, explain to me, like you could explain to them why that's not true, and hopefully you could have a dialogue. But you're in a stronger position by A, being willing to absorb the criticism, and B, spending time to hear them out, and then C, correcting them. Now you have rapport. Now they can actually hear you because you've heard them, they can hear you now. So don't ever shut down a criticism. Lean into the criticism, understand the criticism, and you will walk away being more profoundly insightful about yourself and be in a stronger position to negate the criticism. Okay? That's like psychology 101. Never ever, okay, shut down a criticism. Lean into it and hear what they have to say. Take out everything. Just say, oh yeah, really, tell me more. What else is there? Oh really? Wow. How did you see that? What makes you understand? Just lean into it. Okay? Okay, I just saved you thousands of dollars in therapy. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so in theory you shouldn't be able to sit in that spot either, even if you move a new chair there. That's their spot. But let's say if your father always sits at the head of the table, and you could push it away, that's still a problem because that area is still his area. It's not just the chair; it's also the spot. Now, if a father says, "I don't mind you sitting in my spot or sitting in my chair," I would still move the chair and move a different chair out of respect. You don't have to. That's going above and beyond. But a father can, or a mother can say, don't worry about it, you're respecting me too much, I don't want to have that kind of relationship with you. First of all, if they say that, they're lying, okay? You should do it anyway. But yeah, you could, I would push it away and then sit in that spot as long as they're okay with me using that spot. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So what if you want to teach them something? Your parents are not, they're in the middle of saying something, and they're slandering your neighbor. Oh, that neighbor, they throw out the garbage, and they're so whatever it is, and they're disgusting, and they're dirty, and they're whatever it is, like you're sitting there and like it's driving you crazy. So how do you teach your parents about, important moral truths? So number one is never do it in the heat of the moment. And never do it in front of the other parent. So if both parents are there and they're like gossiping, and you're like, well, Dad and Mom, I can't believe you're listening to this garbage. This is complete lashon hara. You're going to burn in hell. Don't do that. Okay? First of all, you have to. The way to win your parents is by dividing and conquering. You can't beat them when they're together. You have to separate them apart. I hope my kids don't watch this. Right? You have to separate them apart. Okay, and then tackle each one on their own because each one is different. Sometimes a father is more cerebral or more emotional, and the mother is more cerebral, or whatever it is. Like you have to tackle each one separately. Don't do it together because you're disrespecting one in front of the other. You're going to lose. The parents have responsibility to gang up on you and crush you. Okay, so don't do it in front of both of them. Single them out separately. Okay, never respond in real time. It's not worth it. You're going to lose. Come back a few hours later, or even better, the next day, and say, "Hey, Dad or Mom, yesterday when I saw you guys doing that, it really bothered me. It was like I just feel like it's slander. There's this thing called lashon hara, slander. It's like whenever someone's speaking negatively and there's no purpose to that negative speech, it's petty, and that's not who we want to be. Don't we want to be more? Don't you want to be someone who's more has a higher moral standing than that?" Now they could say no. I don't really care. I want the right to say whatever I want about whoever I want, and that's you did your part. And then not to get involved. When they say that, just walk out of the room, and that's it. It's totally fine. I don't want to just say if you see me walking out of the room because you're doing that stuff, don't be insulted. I hope you understand. I just don't want to hear that kind of stuff, and that's totally fine. But never do it real time. Always do it later, and never do it when they're together. Separate them. Divide and conquer. Any other questions? Okay, let's keep going. So then he says as follows. He says, okay, the other two parts here, the names, okay? Let's say your father's name is David, okay? Can you say the name David, right? So thank you so much. Number one is you can't call your father by his name. Now, like for example, like my wife, her name is Nalini. She's probably the only Jewish Nalini on the planet. Nalini is an Indian name. It comes from India. Her father was born in Mumbai. Nalini is Hindi for lotus flower. So my children can't say, "Oh, my Nalini, said," or it's a problem. Now, in the Sephardic community, not my custom, but my children's custom, they name after the living. So my granddaughter's name is Nalini. So now they could say the name Nalini because they have a child who they could call Nalini, and this kind of gets them out of the trouble of saying the name Nalini. But let's say they have some other strange name that just doesn't exist. If the name is David, you can speak of David as Ephraim because that's a common name. That's what he says. But if they have an uncommon name, you can't say that name. Yeah.
What is the name of the word?
Like pleasure, like joy.
Or joy?
Yeah.
You can't say that word.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Is it actually?
Yeah. It's a problem. Now, so you could say it in the context of a sentence, but if you're saying it and it sounds like you're saying their name, oh, joy, depending on how you say it, it can be a problem. If it's in a sentence, oh, I had so much joy from seeing that, it's not a problem. But there are... Everything that's here is a derabanan, but it's based on a deoraita. It's how we apply the deoraita.
Let's say I meet someone whose name is Sarah.
When the
Oh, my
Torah
mom's name is
when the
Sarah.
Torah says kavod, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? So like it's true that the rabbis are explaining it, but it's based on a deoraita, like mezuzah. Where do you put mezuzah? It says you put it on the door. Well, how do you put it? That's the rabbis explaining how to apply the deoraita. These are deoraitas. We're trying to understand how to fulfill the mitzvah of kibbud aveim. These are big deals. So we in our culture, I had the Princess of Lucknow at our house. Lucknow is a province in India. She is good friends with my mother-in-law, and like she comes to New York sometimes, and they spend Shabbat with us. As a matter of fact, when she came to our house, she loved the idea of a challah cover and what it was symbolic about. And she has like one of the things that they make in Lucknow are silk, and so she started making silk challah covers, and she sells them to like Gwyneth Paltrow and other like big like celebrities, like Shabbat challah covers. And she got the idea from my house, okay. And one of the things that they're really skilled at is making patterns in silk using fire. I don't know. I'm not sure what that means exactly. I have one of these things. I'm happy to show it to you. They're cool and they're expensive. But anyway, so the Princess of Lucknow says that when she was growing up, out of respect for her siblings, forget about her parents, like her older brother, she would never call him by name. She would say, "My honored elder brother, honored elder sister." Like that's how you'd speak. Even with the older siblings, out of kavod for the parents, they would say something. They would never use their names and just show them respect to the siblings that are older. Forget about the parents, but certainly never speak the parents' names. Right? Are you willing to go ahead and call your sibling honored elder or whatever? No, I'm going to give you a noogie. Like, why are you talking? Why would I say that? Yeah.
How much is it up for expectation? If you're in
Mom is not their name. That's fine.
no, I'm saying if you scream at an airport,
Oh. Well, first of all, if you say mom in an airport, your mother will recognize your voice. Okay? And you can't say their name. You could say Mrs. Daba, turn around, please. That's the best you could do, but you can't say whatever your mom's name is. Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't say. Yeah, you could. If it's an uncommon name, then you could write. You could spell. You shouldn't be speaking his name. Yeah. You could write it down on a sheet of paper. You could go ahead and say that my parents. You could say where my father lives. You could say what he does. You could Google him. Yeah, you do say that, but that's the only way you could say his name is when it's tethered to your name. When you're getting an aliyah. So you could call out his name in the public and you say, Chaim ben David or whatever it is, and that's different. Because again, those are common names. Right, but if it's an uncommon name there, even still, it's part of your name. That's why you're allowed to use it. But it's just stam uttering the name. It sounds like here the Shulchan Aruch is saying is that you should not be saying his name. Period. Yeah. Question? No. Okay. Number 3. To what extent is there fear? Had the son been dressed? This is a crazy one. Ready? Had the son been dressed with fine clothing and sitting at the head of the community, and his father and mother came and ripped his clothes, hit him on his head, and spit in him in front of him, he should not shame them, but rather remain silent and fear the King of Kings, who so commanded him. That is how far fear of your parents go. Now, I don't know if I could do that. I think that's really hard. But to that level, to that extent, we're talking about fear. Like you should have every right to go ahead and respond. You should have every right to go ahead and say, hey, like, who the hell are you to come in here and rip off my clothing and spit on me in public? That's the most shameful thing you could possibly do to somebody. But ad kadei kach, that's how far fear goes. Now, let's say the parents are known to be abusive, okay? And they're psychologically abusive, and they're mentally abusive, and this is another extension of their abuse. That's different. If the parents have shown no reason to do this kind of behavior, and out of nowhere, suddenly they did this, you would have to lean on the fact that they're normal, sane people, and something doesn't make sense. I can't respond to them here. We're not talking about abusive parents that are coming and continuing the abuse in public. We're talking about where parents have built the foundation. They have spent time and they've shown that they care and they deserve their honor. And now they've done this. And now the question is, how do you respond here? You stay in silence. Something is off. I'm not going to respond here out of respect for my parents. That's the respect that they deserve here. Is that clear? Questions? Okay. Number 4. What is honor? Okay. He feeds him and gives him drink, dresses and covers him, and brings him in and takes him out. And he does so with a pleasant countenance. That's the hardest part. For even if he feeds him fat and foul every day, that's chicken, yet does so with an angry face, he'll be punished for it. And likewise the opposite. If one makes him grind with a milestone, but his intention is for the good, in order to save his father from something harder than this, and he speaks with appeasement to the heart of his father and shows him his intention is for the good until his father agrees to grind with him the millstone, he acquires the world to come. And he serves him in other ways, which is okay, fine. So here you have two different, opposing ideas. The Shulchan Aruch is saying that, on the one hand, you're going to take care of your parents, do it in the most respectful kind of way, always. You're fighting with your parents are annoying you, doesn't really matter. You got to play your part. The question I always ask myself is, how do I play my part in the situation I'm in? That's all there is. The halachot are there to teach you how to respond and play your role to the best of your ability. So on the one hand, you want to do all the nice things, but you got like a sour face, you got a resting face on, that's really nasty. That's a problem, right? Because it's all about in the process of how you're serving them. And it's supposed to be hard. Again, it's not easy. These are difficult things. These are very difficult things we're asking you to do. So in light of all this, you're going to be punished for that. Doing all the right things, but you have a negative face on. Horrible. You're asking your father to do something, your mother to do something. Let's say they got to go on a diet, and you're forcing them to go to the gym, and you're doing it in the most respectful, honorable way, even though it's hard for them. That is a blessing. We're not saying you placate your parents, do whatever they want. We're saying you got to do what is right. But the one constant is in the way in which you're approaching them. Are you doing it in the most meaningful, honorable, respectful way you possibly can? Are you going outside of your comfort zone? Even though you're just in a bad mood, you don't want to talk to them, you don't want to look at them, you want to be alone. Are you doing the best that you can under the circumstances you find yourself in? If the answer is yes, even though you're asking them to do something that is difficult, you, my friends, are rewarded. Number 5, and which he gives him food and he gives him drink. That is from the resources of the father and the mother. When we talk about honoring your parents, we're not talking about you going ahead and taking them to, if your father says, I really want to go to Reserve Cut every single night for dinner, that is not kibbud av v'em. You could take him to Reserve Cut, but it's got to come off his credit card, not your credit card. You don't have to go bankrupt for honoring your parents. Of course, you got to provide for them as much as you can, but if you're talking about the minimal responsibility of honoring them, as far as feeding them, is with their own money. It says, right, if he has. However, if the father does not have and the son does have, we force him and he sustains the father according to what he can afford. So that depends on your own financial circumstances, what you can give to them. But beyond that, you don't have to do. You want to go above and beyond with their money, not a problem, but not with your money. Where was I? Okay. We force him to sustain his father according to a case. But if the son does not have, he is not obligated to knock on the doors and feed his father. Some say that he's only obligated to give him that which he is obligated to give to charity. So, meaning, let's say you're going to give your maaser, and your maaser is $10,000 a year, and therefore your aniyei ircha kodem, the poor people of your city comes first, which means you look to the closest spot possible to who you're going to give your charity to. If you have a father or mother, that they come first. Siblings are second. First cousins, second cousins, third cousins are next. Your neighbors, next. The people in your city and town, next. The people in the next state, next. The people in the next country, next. That's how we give charity. So he says over here that at the very least, your obligation is to go ahead and give it to your parents. You're going to give that charity. Some say that only obligated to give them that which is obligated to charity. Okay, so wrote the Beit Yosef. It appears to be from the words of the Rif and the Rush, and so too did the Ran write So this is all an agreement of other Rishonim that it's not just with their money, but also with your money that's charity. But nevertheless, if he has the wherewithal, a curse will come to one who supports his father with his charity monies. Okay, meaning if you have the ability, you're making $1 million, and you're giving $100,000 charity, and you're putting away an extra $400,000 a year, and you can afford an extra $25,000 to give to your parents what they need. Don't take that out of charity. That's you cheating the system, right? If you could have the means of preparing giving to your family, then you should be doing that even from your own money. And if he has several sons, they calculate their obligation according to their money. And if some of them are rich and some of them are poor, only the rich ones are obligated. So you have 5 siblings, and you're the one that's killing it. That is more so your obligation than the other siblings. So be mindful of that. But this is also true, I would say, even from a psychological place. If you have, other siblings and they're all complicated emotionally, and you're the one in the family that's more balanced, then it might be your responsibility to show more kavod than your siblings, and that's okay. That's your mitzvah. That's your obligation. Yeah.
When it comes to the same, it's better to give first within, closer to, let's say parents or siblings, neighbor.
Yeah.
What if it's a matter of someone can be very distant, but they need it more?
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Your family, aniyah ircha comes first. Doesn't matter who needs more. Your mitzvah to give tzedakah is very simple. Just you got to give it. Give it first to the people that need it closest to you, and then outward.
Where does Israel fall into community?
It's a great question. So there's a special mitzvah giving money in Israel, no question about it. But if you had a choice between giving someone in Yerushalayim money and someone on 49th Street, 49th Street comes first.
Really?
Yeah. It's
So
like
that's why I was thinking, let's say you
Yeah.
have a neighbor. Your neighbor
Yeah.
needs
Your neighbor comes
something.
first. Your neighbor now. So you don't have to give all your tzedakah to the person next door. You could divide it and do like 60, 60-40, 70-30, however you want it. But like, I would say that the majority of it has to go first to your local people before it goes further away. Yeah. Yeah.
So where exactly does the concept of fear come from? It's not explicit. The word
So-
fear is
Actually, it is explicit. There are 2 verses. We did this the weeks before. You probably missed it. We spoke about there are 2 verses in the Torah. One is to honor your parents. The other is to fear your parents. In the 10 Commandments, it speaks about it on the honor side. But later again, it speaks about fearing your parents, and it actually says fear your mother and your father. And so they're both explicitly written in the Torah, but not in the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments in the honor part, that's what you're thinking about, and the fear part is later on in the Torah. It does mention the fear part. So that's why he's talking about it in both of these terms. Good question. Okay, so, but what is obligated to honor him with his body? And even though he becomes idle from his work through this, then becomes required to knock on the doors. That specifically when the son has sustained his, that will sustain himself to that day, but he does not have it, he's not obligated idle from his work to knock on the doors. Meaning, like, you don't have to stop. If you can't afford it, you have to quit your job and start going and collecting money to support your parents. That's not your obligation. Okay? The minimum requirement of honoring your parents is to take it from their own money. You can't do that. If you have charity dollars, that makes sense, then do it for your charity dollars. Obviously, if you're affluent, then your responsibility is to do what you can to go ahead and support them. Now, if he needs anything in the city, and he knows that they would fulfill his requests for the sake of his father, even though he knows that they would also fulfill the thing for his sake, nevertheless, he should say, do this one thing for my sake, but rather for the sake of my father, in order that the attached honor his father. So that you have a guy, he's down the street, he's a pizza guy, Shlomo, okay? And Shlomo knows you and your dad, and you're like, come on, Shlomo, do me a favor. He could do you a favor, but you could say, hey, Shlomo, do this for my dad, is more respectable and more respectful than, say, doing it for me. How are we creating a vocabulary that allows us to be mindful of honoring our parents? Matters. What we say matters. How we say it matters. So if we're not going to put the idea of their honor at the forefront of our minds, you're never going to remember it. So of course you could go ahead and say, oh, Shlomo, do me a biggie. right? But if Shlomo knows your dad, you have to say, Shlomo, do this for my dad, out of honor, out of respect for my father. As a way to remind yourself about the respect you need to have for your father. Okay? One is obligated to stand before his father, but if his father is a student of his son, each one must stand before the other. So that means, let's say I teach my father, then when I walk into the room, my dad has to stand up for me, and I have to stand up for him. Okay? It goes both ways. That's how far. Now, why do you think that's the halacha? It's like a weird thing. Like, my dad's going to stand up for me? You're teaching your mom Torah, now your mom has to stand up for you?
Respect is modeled, so I feel like if your father is able to show you respect, then you could understand what respect means in your dad. But if it's not modeled, then it's...
So that's 100. Yeah, it's got to be modeled. And I would say I want to add on to that modeling idea. Is that what?
Teachers consider your father.
It's
Teachers consider your father.
correct. So what the Torah does not want is for you to relinquish your responsibility to teach Torah to your children. Who's teaching who? So if you got to a point where your child knows more than you do and he's teaching you, you've relinquished aspects of your own honor. It doesn't want you to do that. It's trying to convince you to say, hey, do you want to be the guy that has to stand up for his kid when he walks into the room? Or are you going to be the guy, are you going to be the motivated person that's going to go out and know this stuff well enough so that you can teach it to your kids? Think about it for a minute. It doesn't want you to lose honor, but it wants to motivate you and say, hey, listen up, my friends. If you don't do this, you could lose aspects of your honor to your children. Tur says in the name of the Rush, but if the son wants to forgo his honor, which he should, so to serve the father, it's permitted. For behold, the teacher who forgoes his honor is forgiven. But that is specifically in private or even in public, right? Such as everyone knows that this is his father, he is his father. But if the son is a great Torah scholar and his father is not known in the city, we should be concerned about the disgrace of the Torah. If the son is disgraced before the father, so they should not distance themselves from one another, so neither could go ahead and be reduced his honor in front of his fellow. All the understanding of the rabbi, according to the opinion of the Rabbi Yosef, and so did the Maharal do with his father. So there's precedent, meaning that there are scenarios we know in history where there were great rabbis whose father were just like good guys, but not as scholarly. And in those scenarios, those fathers, out of respect for the Torah, would stand for their kids. Now, if he had a public position, it's complicated. Now, there's two different kinds of people you're going to stand up for. This is just a general rules of honor. So, when a rabbi walks into the room, when do you stand up for him? You see the rabbi across the room now. So the answer is depends on what the relationship is that you have with that rabbi. If this rabbi is your personal teacher and he teaches you Torah, you see him across the room, you got to stand up as soon as you see him walk into the room. But let's say it's just a rabbi visiting, and you don't know him, but you know he's a rabbi. You'd only stand up for him when he gets within your Dalet Amot. Right? He's not someone that teaches you Torah, but he's a rabbi. You stand up for him when he gets within like 6 feet of where you're at. You don't have to stand up immediately. You give more honor to that person that you have a personal relationship with, who is actually teaching you. Okay, I want to do one more, and I want to call it a night because my stomach is killing me. Okay, up to where? How extensive is the honor of a father and a mother? Even if the parents took his purse full of gold coins and threw it into the sea in front of him, I love these cases. He should not embarrass them, nor be distressed before them, nor get angry towards them. But he should rather accept the written decree and be silent. How many people here could do that? Your parent takes your Bitcoin, wallet, and erases it. What do you do? Right? What do? You sit there and say, thanks, Dad. Thanks, Mom. I hate you! How can you do that? Right? Or do you just sit there and say, okay, it's from God. This is what I was going to lose this money anyway. And the Shulchan Aruch says, you got to take it like a champ. Can't complain about it. Now again, we're talking about a scenario where the parents have rapport with the kid. No rapport, that's a different scenario. Yeah.
So if there's a report of one of the parents is an objective Russia, they're murderers, they've done something in the
Even if a parent was an SS Nazi, okay, a capo, you still have to give them honor. Doesn't matter what they do or don't do, you still have to give them honor. Now, unless there are scenarios where, again, a parent can lose honor, but that you have to ask your LOR to figure out if that. I'm not going to speak about it here. Like, there are scenarios where they can lose it, but you got to ask a competent local Orthodox rabbi to understand the scenario and see if that applies to the situation that that person is in. Okay, where was I? Okay, so this is the Ramah, and some say that if he wants to throw the son's person to the sea, he may prevent him. For, behold, he is only obligated to honor him from the resource of his father, but not from his own son. So now you have machloket between the Ashkenazim and the Sfardim. The Sfardim halacha over here would be that, I'm pretty sure Rav Avadia is posek like this. So anyway, he's not as strict as the Shulchan Aruch, right? The Shulchan Aruch says, your father wants to do this, you can't stop him. But the Ramah, the Ashkenazim say, no, your father does this, since your obligation is to what? Is to support him from his money and not your own money, then you could stop him, because that's your money. You can't have right access to your money. And that's the Ramah says over here. And some say that if he wants to throw the son into the sea, okay, so behold, he's obligated to honor him to now. But not from those of the son. Right, so the Torah says the name of the Ri, and there is no distinction between the honoring him and causing him distress. And only before that they threw it, that's when you could go ahead and stop it. As possible, they will prevent him to do so, but they already threw it. It's forbidden to embarrass him. So now it depends on what state you're in. Two different scenarios. One is, is he about to throw it in, or did he throw it in? If he's about to throw it in, you can stop him. But if he threw it in already, now what's the response? The question is always, what is the response? What is the response worth? This is the hardest thing in the world for a child to do, because our parents say things that trigger us. They can say one word, and it's like 25, 30 years of history, and they just set you off. And it's so easy to lose yourself. But the question you have to always be mindful of is like this. Number one is be mindful of the fact that your parents are your parents no matter what. Okay, for better or for worse, those are your parents. You didn't choose them, God chose them for you. There are no other parents in the world that could have raised you. There are no other people on the planet that could have given you what you need to be whatever you are. The circumstances are yours alone. Now, my responsibility is to play my part to my best ability I possibly can play it. And therefore, the idea of me showing reverence to my parents under these circumstances is a tool in me doing another thing, having reverence for God. Oh, I just lost all that money. Holy, how did that happen? Where was God? If you're someone that has the ability of responding to my parents in the most meaningful possible way, when you find yourselves dealing with other stuff, you'll respond in the most meaningful possible way. You know what they say? They say that at the end, everything will always work out. And if you're going through something in life that hasn't worked out, it's because it's not the end yet. But at the end, it will work out. At the end, it's always good. If it's not good now, don't worry about it. It's not the end. In the end, it'll be good. You'll get there. Challenge is always going to be there. But I promise you the one thing that's 100% constant, at the end, it's always good. Look at the stock market over the last 100 years. At the end, it was always good. If you invested, you did pretty well. Right? Nope, you can't say that past performance will determine future results, obviously. But statistically speaking, your money is better there than it is anywhere else. It'll be good. Even through the depressions, through the hard times, that's the best time to invest. When we're going through hardship with our parents, that's the best time to invest. Going through hard times in life, that's the best time to invest. What's your response going to be? How are you going to play your role? How are you going to play your part? You choose. Only you decide. But all of this is an exercise in one thing. Am I someone that has worked on, who spent time thinking about refining my traits, refining how I respond to my parents? Because I promise you, most people are not thinking about this. Most people your age are not going to a class on a Monday night, somewhere in the back of a synagogue, on a second floor, on a hot summer night, having conversations about how to honor your parents and honor them and fear them. But if you're here, it's because you're someone who definitely wants to spend time thinking about how you can be a better, greater human being. That's awesome. This is difficult. It's supposed to be difficult. It's part of your character development. The Vilna Gaon says that the whole reason why human beings are on this planet is to develop their character. That's it. You're here for one thing and one thing alone. How do you refine yourselves? There's no greater test than your refinement than the relationship you have with your parents. It is everything. It's never going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. But the one thing that has to be perfect is how you play your part. God willing, we'll pick up number 9 next week. Any other questions before we end for tonight? Shabbat tov, everybody. Thank you so much for listening.